All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started. My name is Lou Marinoff, a professor of philosophy at the City College of New York. I have the honor to chair this initial panel for Harasses. We have a very interesting topic to discuss and a really interesting panel to bring up various aspects for us. And I'll introduce them momentarily and ask them each to say a few words of introduction on the topic. Then we'll have a chance to discuss things in greater depth and also invite participation, both questions and comments from the audience. You're welcome to join us at the main table. It's open to everyone, so please move up if you like. In any case, I would just take a moment to introduce the topic to you before the panelists deliver their opening remarks. As you may know, the title of the panel is Upholding Diversity and Inclusiveness. Diversity is an extremely interesting topic, both in nature and in human culture. We value biodiversity for a great number of reasons, and we're part of that as well. But one of the things that it does is it creates competition. And each species in nature, as you know, be it plant or animal, is vying to find its niche, its evolutionarily stable niche, and also is contending with the inevitability of change and so forth. So 99% of all species that have ever lived, I think, are extinct. We're still here, thankfully, to discuss this. When we come to the topic of human diversity, things become more interesting and more contentious, I think. We value diversity for similar reasons in culture. But cultures will tend often to clash, perhaps, trying to occupy the same or similar niches, and competition within niches can become quite fierce at times. Globalization, as you're all full aware, has really enabled greater cooperation than ever before. And here we are in a room which evidences this. In Vietnam, the first global meeting here, Asia meeting here, and also part of ASEAN, this great conglomeration. Asia has far more diversity than Europe or North America. This topic in North America has political connotations and is a very contentious thing. I think that Asia is the proper place to explore diversity and inclusiveness in its larger and more important context for humanity. Asia has a huge variety of languages, of cultures, of traditions, of histories. And so it is Asians who need to show the way to the rest of the world, I think, to set the example for how we can succeed. To continue as a species, but to uphold these two very important pillars, getting along with one another, creating more opportunity and inclusiveness. So that's the overall theme. It's really a very interesting panel, and I'm just going to go around in order, okay, of how I'm looking at you. We'll go around the table this way and ask each of you to make your introductory remarks. The panel is as diverse as the topic, if not more. We'll allow each panelist a few minutes to introduce herself or himself, as the case may be, and to state some basic ideas that each one has about the topic. And then we will involve the debate in more detail and invite audience participation. Each and every one of you is welcome to contribute your comments and indeed your questions as we proceed, okay? We have the better part of an hour and a half, and our goal is to leave here better informed, more diverse and inclusive than when we walked in, all right? Then I think if we accomplish that, it will be a successful panel. So without further ado, I will start with Priyati Uppala, who is a former investment banker turned Hollywood entrepreneur, I gather, and is a multimedia personality. A global citizen, having traveled to over 65 countries, Priyati is passionate about global cultural issues, and her life dharma is to be a bridge between the East and the West. Well, we certainly need more bridges. So, without further ado, please give us your opening remarks, Priyati, and welcome.
Thank you. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.
Wonderful to have you all here. I'm honored to be here. The narrative of inclusion and cultural diversity is one of grave importance and also one of great contention today. As rightly mentioned before, it's in the West, it's got the political connotations, but for the rest of the world, it really is something so beautiful that we need to protect and honor. Now, today, there are 4.5 billion people who live in Asia. And between them, they speak 2,300 languages. The most widely spoken language, of course, is Mandarin, with 1 billion speakers, followed by Hindi, with 550 million speakers. Now, the Chinese have left it pretty simple. They have their two main languages and, of course, several dialects. But in India, they've got 22 official languages and 780 dialects. So you got 1,000 languages right there. So this just proves that Asia is extremely rich and vibrant. It's got a great cultural tapestry. And ultimately, these numbers also mean dollars. I think 3 questions. Okay. So the 3 questions that come to mind when I think about this topic are, why should we worry about the loss of cultural diversity? Why is it happening? And what can we do about it? So I hope to explore these issues further during our discussion, because I really think that we are the way. And in many ways, India and China and also the rest of the rest of Asia are exemplars for emerging economies of a pluralistic society that even the US and Europe are struggling to achieve. So we have we can inspire and aspire the world at large with what we do. And it's great that we're here talking about this at this very moment. Thank you.
And your 3 questions again?
So the
could you
3
please?
questions that come to my mind when I meditated on this topic were, why should we worry about the loss of cultural diversity?
Yes.
Second, why is it happening? And third, what do we do about it?
Okay. Thank you very much. We will, I'm sure, be addressing these. Thanks, Preti. Next, it's a pleasure to introduce Carl Satinajinan, who is the director and head of a service design team in the office of Philippine opposition senator Bam Aquino. Now, apparently, you use design thinking on human-centered design to draft policy to bridge this implementation. So now we are looking, if you like, at a political and policy wing, not a cultural wing, but a political wing designed to address this. So, Carl, please share your insights with us.
Sure. Thank you, Lou. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a very quick context. Every one of all 24 senators in the Philippines represent the entire country. So basically, our mandate is to represent 100 million Filipinos, and that's a very diverse set of individuals, and so the mandate calls for inclusiveness. And there are many ways to do that, but one of the interesting things we discovered along the way, because both the senator and I were in social enterprise prior to government, was to use human-centered design. It's gone mainstream for a few years. It's popular in business circles, in business schools, but not a lot of people use it in policy making. And so what we thought was, maybe we can take some of the tools in design thinking and use it in the way we make policy in the Philippines. And it worked for us because one of our first few sets of reform initiatives 5 years ago was all on entrepreneurship. And so we used design thinking, human-centered design, service design, whatever you call it, and all these tools to get more people part of the process of building policies for entrepreneurs. And we didn't just talk to entrepreneurs, we talked to the academia, local government, microfinance people. And so the process of making the policy became more colorful. It led to radical changes in our policy initiatives, but letting go of our initial biases, because of that inclusiveness and because of that diversity, led, I think, to a more powerful policy. And so we're reaping some of that benefits today, but we continue to use that for other policy initiatives as well, and happy to share more of our experience.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carl. I'm sure we'll come back to you later for a few more concrete details about how this has actually been operationalized in your office. That's a very interesting notion. Next, to my far left, I would like to introduce someone from our host country, and thank you very much on behalf of Horasis for for hosting these meetings. You've been doing a wonderful job, and we're all very pleased to be in Vietnam. Tran Nguyen Phuong is a member of the board of the directors of the THP Group. Would you please tell us a little bit about your interest in this topic, what you do, and how that implicates our discussion today?
My name again is Phuong, and then today, one more time, I'm here with the traditional dress, and to welcome all of the guests here, and our pleasure to have you all here for Houses. So for the topic, I think I have two questions. First is like diversity and cultural identity. So how can we maintain that for this region with such a like very high growth right now? So how we as a region can increase wealth and prosperities. As the region, so after the World War II, so what does trade mean to this region? So it has been trade making all of the Western product and then export. And that's made first Japan, then Taiwan, Korea, and then other countries grow rapidly. But in 1997, we faced a financial crisis. And that's a lot of lesson learned after that. But after 20 years, a lot of things has been changed. So the open door policy of China, and then even Asian Developed Bank gave us the numbers that it's already intra-regional trade stood at 57.8% value in 2012. And Asia Development Bank Chief Economist Yasuyuki Sawada said that the ratio has raised because global supply chain in Asia expand rapidly in this decade. That means a lot of things has changed and good things come to this region. So as THP, we are the largest private Vietnamese-owned company in FMCG. We do beverage manufacturing, all of the good for health products such as like energy drink, green tea, herbal teas. So I hope that I can invite all of you later for some of the drink that we have to bring here to welcome the host as well. So we do brand building. We have 3 Vietnam national brand. We do manufacturing, distribution. So why language is important for us? Because we come with cross country, and it's important for us to expand and how we can overcome all of the language barriers, like 2,000 languages, oh my God. So it should be something that it should be smarter or better, because language doesn't mean like a lot of different languages. It can be simple signals and the border is like borderless right now. So how to communicate in a way that everybody can understand. Especially in this region, 50% below 35 years old is amazing number of young population love to change. So I hope that we are here, that we can bring a lot of valuable goals, like 18 Asian leaders came together and give a goal that we should reduce malaria in 2030s. So maybe today we can create some goals that we can work together, share with each other, and grow with each other. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Already this raises an interesting question. Perhaps we'll return to it. On the one hand, we're looking at a tremendously young Asian population and a drive toward entrepreneurship, greater diversity within the entrepreneurial community. But on the other hand, we have this tendency coming out of Asia of wanting to brand and to build global brands. And in some sense, I think there's a tension between the two, because branding actually, in some sense, is the antithesis of diversity. Large brands tend to swallow up small ones. So we have a kind of, I think, fascinating interplay, yes, between these two forces. And perhaps we can explore that further. Next, to my left, it's a great honor to reintroduce Brahmachanand Swamiji. Great namaste, Swamiji. We've worked together before. He's a spiritual leader from India, needless to say, a man of so many accomplishments and responsibilities. I can't possibly begin to enumerate them all, but he unfailingly has a very interesting spiritual light to shed on this topic. So without further ado, Swamiji, please.
Namaste everyone. Thank you, Professor Marinoff. Let me introduce myself first. I am Swami Brahmeshanandacharya. We have a tradition of master-disciple tradition, and I am working for peace and unity in diversity. Also, we are here together to discuss a very important topic, and this is not only for related topic to only Asian countries, but it's for world. Diversity and inclusiveness. Actually, diversity already God has gifted us this diversity, and we need to just experience the diversity, respect the diversity what God has gifted us, and very important part we have to do is inclusiveness, which is the important part what I feel. Inclusiveness in every sense with regards to God has gifted us different types of species, different types of religions, different types of caste, creed, all these things are here in this world. But if all these things come together with respect, then world will be happy with the thought which he has in his aim. But now today every important point comes to mind is why people are going ahead with their own thought, and they feel that my topic or my place or my religion or my faith is very, very important. Actually, we should respect with regards all faiths or all religions are very important. And in Asia, we have many faith believers or many religions in Asia, and all the core of these religions or faiths are God. And if God is the core, then why we are forgetting humanity? It is also part of our culture. So I will be happy to explain how it will be easy or how it will be convenient to all to respect all religions or faith, and secondly, how we can promote humanity, which will be helpful for developing country as well as humanity.
Thank you very much, Swamiji. You know, I can't help but to comment that as both a devotee and a teacher of Indian philosophy, I'm always impressed by its inherent inclusiveness and tolerance among all world religions. It is the message of Arjuna to Krishna to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, which says, by whatever road they travel, they come to me at last.
Exactly.
And I don't know of any scripture in the world which is so absolutely open and expansive. So you have a great way to show many of the more contentious interpretations of God, and I hope that you will succeed in your mission to make the world a more peaceful place. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we have yet another representative from India to introduce, and this is once again a diverse panel, so we have someone doing something in a slightly different way. Mr. Rupan Roy is the founder and the CEO of Sumantrana Management Consultants. You're based in Kolkata, sir?
Yes.
Yes, so please tell us about a little bit about yourself and your interest in this topic.
I was the CEO of Deloitte Consulting for a long time. After that, I established Shu Mantrana. Shu means good, Mantrana means advice. And I advise, I'm on the board of several listed companies, but I advise family groups as also many startups. I'm on the board of Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta's Innovation Park, so that we can create more job creators rather than job seekers, and that's one dimension of inclusiveness. Wow. Now, I'll start with a little anecdote and then very briefly give my views. Recently, the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, landed up in India, and he was seen in a photograph which he tweeted with several women journalists, and he was purportedly, he later denied, he said somebody had given it to him, so he was holding it, three words which fly bang into this topic. It said smash violence, smash Brahminical patriarchy. And this created a storm in India, and finally he had to apologize. Now, we can come back to this because we have another dimension of inequality or non-inclusiveness, which is the caste system which has come through generations. Now, we try to exclude people in many ways. It could be digital inclusion. You don't give them internet access, so how can you include them? You exclude them financially. You exclude them socially. You exclude them politically. You exclude them on the basis of gender. So there are many dimensions of excluding certain sections or groups of people from the mainstream. Now, I would like to see, and I don't want to belabor this point, I think I'll have a chance to speak my mind. The real debate everywhere, for example in the US as well, is that do you bridge this gap by affirmative action? In India you have a debate, do you do that by quotas? Or what element of inclusiveness should you focus on? Is it, in my view, it should be financial. If I belong to a certain group of people, but my father is very rich and very capable and connected, I shouldn't be using quotas. So there should be a fair way. I'm not against quotas, I'm not against affirmative action. I'm saying the basic root cause has to be addressed of why certain types of people are excluded from the mainstream and not allowed to sit at the dinner table. So we'll come to that, but these are my opening remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for introducing some of the necessary points of controversy. And indeed, as you rightly point out, in the US, this is a very big issue and one that drives, I think, most of the polarization around this problem. I will spare you from my own views, save to say that at bottom it is a philosophical question, what we consider fairness and justice, and how indeed we seek to operationalize those terms as policy. It seems empirically obvious to anyone with common sense that equal opportunity is a desirable thing for people across the board, but that at the same time equal opportunity does not lead necessarily to equal outcomes, and that unequal outcomes are not necessarily signs of injustice. And so this is a very difficult issue for many people even to get their minds around, let alone to parse out. And I hope that will return to some of this. I also hope that since you're debating this in India with such enthusiasm, that you don't make many of the mistakes we've made in the US. We'll leave it there. Finally, last but not least on our panel, yet another element of diversity joins our discussion. Ho Jia is an entrepreneur, engineer, and filmmaker. He's founded Vidsy, is that the pronunciation? A leading video entertainment platform for short premium content. Let's not neglect the Web 2.0, which connects us all as perhaps never before. And so you have a voice in this as well, surely. Vidsy is on a mission to empower storytellers by enabling the creation of films and amplifying stories to targeted audiences. So you have a different way of engineering some solutions to this problem. Please enlighten us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be here. So just a background of Vidsy. So we started 5 years ago, primarily on the reason when we looked out here in Southeast Asia, we were trying to find stories from the region, and we realized it was so diverse, there was no platform that could actually converge them all together. So we started on that premise, wanting to get locals to actually enjoy their own local content, as well as also enjoying your neighboring country's content altogether. And five years on, what we've seen is that, we've streamed over 1 billion views through our platform. And what we've seen is 20% of the content through our platform are actually around the topic of acceptance. So acceptance being maybe acceptance of the other, so the other being individuals or communities which have conflicting, opposing views of the main characters in the films. And what we're seeing is a lot of these films, which represent like 20% of short films on the platform, are are very highly engaged. So people are actually around the region are actually seeking and looking to see varying viewpoints from another person's perspectives through the films. And what we're seeing is also interracial relationship stories, like love stories, do really well on the platform because it highlights the authenticity around what's really happening. And we've also seen, like, again, very high engagement around such content. Engagement being not only in terms of the completion rates of the content, but also the kind of comments coming in, bringing light to varying views, but all together in one film altogether. And also just an example will also be one of a film that came onto our platform, which is called Open Door Singapore, and it is actually a story between it's a Singapore and Filipino story about domestic worker abuse in Singapore. And within 3 months, we had 100 million views around that piece of content. And it's really encouraging to see the kind of comments and conversations taking place just around a simple 5-minute story, and the speed and the growth of how content is being propagated in today's day and age through the mobile. It's astounding in itself. And yeah, having said that, I guess like looking at the young audience, like what you clearly mentioned earlier, in this region, I think the audience are yearning for deeper revelation in terms of like true stories, true issues, and I think this is definitely a potential area in terms of like pursuing diversity in the region through video.
Thank you very much for that important contribution. I mean, after all, young people are probably spending more time online than they are with their noses in books these days. And I know that live streaming and other forms of video edutainment are increasingly important to them. What your numbers, I think, reflect this tremendous democratizing trend. The web is very democratic in the sense that if you put something up there and people like it, there's no limit to how much attention you can attract. And so I wish you success in disseminating these messages with important social content to make people think about the issues. Yes, that's the main thing. So as you can see, we've had already a tremendous amount of diversity in terms of input from our panelists on the topic of diversity and inclusiveness. I think it might be interesting to open the floor at this point, if you don't mind, and invite questions or comments from the audience. And so if you would like to contribute and direct any questions to the panel in particular, I think this would be a very good way for us to proceed. So may I invite, sir, would you like to introduce yourself and to make your question or comment?
Namaste everyone, this is Advocate Brahmi Devi ji. I am the President of Sadhguru Foundation. It's my pleasure to be part of this session, and I really like the discussion that started with all the members here. Miss Preeti gave very good information regarding 2,300 languages we have here. This is the main, all the Asian countries have different culture. So my question to today's debate is, at the end she told, why should we should think about loss of our culture and diversity? Why we should not have one debate, discussion here to have a positive solution? Sadhguruji gave the message of positivity to the world in this session. So today, Mr. Roy told us today that we have a young generations which believe in social media. We can give the concept of digital solutions to this topic of diversity and inclusiveness. So if we have a discussion today, that can we have a positive solution to the world?
Okay, those are great questions. Could I turn it back to you then for a moment, since you started this ball rolling?
All right, okay, bring it on.
So could we go to your second and third questions? Why is there, in your perception, a loss of cultural diversity? That's really, and what do you think we can do about it? What's your executive summary of those two issues?
Awesome. I mean, it's great that we are even here discussing this very topic, because I think topically it's important. So I thought about, why is this happening in the first place? A few things come to mind. Firstly, there are few cultures that are determining the fabric of the whole of the system. So, for example, English is the global standard of language in the world today. And the US and UK model of governance and business is the global standard or the gold standard. I think this is a part of where the issue lies, because most societal systems are shaped by a particular group or a particular language. So, it's such a cutthroat world out there. So what I find is happening out there is, in order to survive and compete on a global level, especially out here in Asia, we're finding people forced to turn their back on their own culture and language just so that they can play the game, so to speak. So if they realize that that's not the case, that they don't necessarily have to give up anything to gain something, then they would protect and embrace and honor what they have, which is so special, and they can still be out there, competing on a global stage. So I feel that that narrative needs to change, that it's not just English that's, the only language acceptable. It's not just the UK or the US style of business, it's celebrate the what's unique about other cultures and the way other countries conduct business or politics or whatnot. So I think if we start moving in that direction, that's going to be a wonderful thing. And so it's the imbalance of power, I think, that is where we stand to lose the cultural diversity, and people need to realize that you don't necessarily have to give up power, and that there necessarily isn't an imbalance. We can slightly balance it in that way. And so the other point, where do we go from now? Well, in thinking about cultural diversity, what I found was that a very pivotal thing is indigenous cultures all around the world, because they are the original people. So I think we need to uphold rights of people, and specifically the indigenous cultures, because I think ultimately culture is about people's rights. And we need to know the value of cultural diversity. I think collectively we need to create systems and models that celebrate diversity, explore the differences that we have, and invent different ways of thinking and being.
All right, thank you very much for that. We're going to, Mr. Rupen has something to add to this.
Sorry, inferior about English being a gold standard, because as you know, Bernard Shaw had said that America and England are two countries divided by a common language. So there's and more Indians speak English today than native English speakers in England. That's the first one. Second thing is that in a global economy, how does an Indian fit in or dovetail as a global citizen? I think the best suggestion came from our first Nobel laureate, Rabindranath Tagore, in his preamble, which he wrote in his own hand in English in Vishwabharati. And he said, "It is the right of every Indian to receive what is the best in the rest of the world, and the obligation to offer the best of our culture." So there is no inclusion or exclusion. And he said something which I'll try to translate. Dibe ar nibe milabe milibe jabe na phire. You will give and you will take, and you will assimilate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would tend to support this notion, and you know that in North America, where we have less diversity than Asia for sure on the cultural and linguistic side, nonetheless there are quite a number of indigenous peoples who have gone forward with your suggestion, which is putting more onus on them to work. But they have now resources and support from rights-minded governments to pursue their own cultural studies so as not to lose their language and not to lose their customs, but at the same time to learn, of course, fluency with English and fluency with curricula which allow them to compete in today's marketplace. So I would concur, it's not either orness. The onus is on us as mindful beings to make the most that we can of our opportunities, surely. Would any other panelists like to contribute to this thread? We have a new thought. Oh, Swamiji, yes, please. Okay, ma'am, please introduce yourself.
On. Is on. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Rosalina. Pleasure to be here in an intimate group and hopefully actually be able to listen to people's opinion. I would like to be slightly provocative and build on your point, which I think relates to what you've been talking about. I don't come from a privileged background, and I'm only here because some people sweated blood to afford me this opportunity. And we are all here because some people in our lives worked darn hard to get us here. I'm a human rights lawyer by training, and I think this conversation in the 4 decades that I've been living on this earth is fundamentally about power. And if you look at history, every civilization, with no exception, has been built on the backs of slaves. However we define it, however we dress it up, however seductive we make it look. So I feel like in some ways we've been skirting the issue. We've been giving it different wrappings every decade, and yet the needle hasn't moved. Because the true question is, if we really want an inclusive society, what are those with power, however that power looks like, what are we prepared to give up so that we truly have an inclusive society? That conversation I have not heard being had.
Very interesting. One reason why you haven't heard it is that the Greeks tried this experiment in ancient Athens. They decided that qualifications were irrelevant to holding positions of responsibility, and that fairness demanded that all offices of the city be awarded on the basis of a lottery, which is why they collapsed. So it's one thing to observe that, yes, for most of human history, I would say that almost everyone has been a slave, male and female alike, notwithstanding race and ethnicity. We've all been slaves at one time or another. But the rights revolutions, the democratic revolutions and the rights revolutions that post-Enlightenment have swept the world and are still sweeping the world, have created unprecedented opportunities, have lifted millions of people out of, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and are still progressing. So I would say if you're going to try and sell some kind of utopian Marxist vision to this community, you'll have a hard sell. If you're going to sell piecemeal social engineering of a progressive kind, you'll have an easier sell. And so I think that's a very good challenge that you put to us, and I would like to hear it taken up by some of our panelists.
Very quickly, I just wanted to share another perspective in that. So, agree completely that there's a power dynamic that needs to be addressed. One very interesting point I learned recently by Eric, there's a guy, he's a civic activist named Eric Liu, and he wrote a book, and what he said was that power isn't finite, it's infinite. It's just that, yes, there are problems with those who hold power, but those who are seemingly powerless also don't seem to find their own power. And one thing that I experienced this firsthand in the Philippines is when we open up our policy-making process to all sorts of people, everybody. But even then, you'll have individuals who'd go say, why are you talking to us? You should know what needs to be done. Why are you consulting us? And so my insight from that was even opening it up is not everyone appreciates it because they think they're powerless. They think it's a learned helplessness that I think we need to address also. So yes, we need to address the powers that be and convince them to share that power, but also there is also that other struggle of, Eric says it's organizing the powerless. There are other ways to do it, but opening up the process, for example, but just I think recognizing that even among the powerless, there's also that learned helplessness that we need to overcome. Because otherwise, if they think that they'll just forever be victims of this struggle, then there's no inclusiveness.
Yeah, so with regards to censorship laws, I think like on a government standpoint, it's quite similar to like how they perceive YouTube and all. It's an open platform. I mean, there's so much that you can only police. I mean, hundreds of thousands of hours are being uploaded every second. So I think that's just one way around things. I mean, thankfully, I mean we are definitely under certain Broadcast Act in Singapore itself, but a lot of it is actually just more around understanding what kinds of content are on the platform. So everything on our platform is actually curated. So there is a certain level. If we know if we know there is in some way, it's not really self-censorship, but it's more of like guarding the community, because the community that we represent needs to be protected also. So I think that's kind of how we look at censorship. Majority of the content through our platform is actually people find out about it through word of mouth, through social media. People share it. So a lot of that has actually helped because it's very we are kind of distributing to the digital natives. 70% of the consumption through the platform occurs through smartphones, and the way how people discover them are through social media sites. So we are across multiple various platforms, from Facebook to Instagram to YouTube and all, and that's kind of how content propagates and how the ideas and stories propagate. And I guess to what extent, in terms of how we see ourselves facilitating the variety of views. So on our platform, we have close to 2,000 content creators, storytellers, voices being represented through the platform. And what we do is, and our stand is actually we facilitate the voices that are unheard of to be heard, but we not necessarily stand behind to say that this is the be it and all, or this is the definitive voice that should be followed. Because how we see things in terms of curation is really the more diverse the stories are, the more authentic stories are coming out from varying views, the better understanding that each individual from an audience standpoint are able to grapple with the issues and being able to resolve it, because majority of time it's always a gray area, especially with the kinds of laws which are currently being passed or different camps. So for us, it's just really, our stand is really facilitating the conversations and the representation of those stories. So we highly encourage varying views, varying stories that come out, because at the end of it, the kind of comments, the kind of conversations that take place, we think it will progress us as an audience moving forward.
I'd like to follow up from this as well with you, if I may. First, a small question, then a larger one. Are your films subtitled? Are they multilingual? What's your language platform?
Yeah, so English is the common denominator, but I would say close to 90% of our content are in local languages. So it may be in Bahasa, Tagalog, Chinese,
Mandarin.
Mandarin, yeah.
Okay, and the second question really follows again from you in this tremendous observation that you made earlier about fewer cultures determining global standards. I mean, it's always been this way. There are in nature apex predators, and there are in cultural terms apex civilizations. They don't always last, but when they hold sway over many. And we've seen quite a number come and go. My question really to the panelists is, are you as concerned about Google as you are about English or America? I am. I mean, Google is scary. They right now dominate global standards in political correctness, in what's acceptable broadcasting, in what kinds of moral values are both implicitly and explicitly being imposed on young people through their own very nefarious ways of manipulating algorithms and censorship, and particularly some of the people who've been kicked off YouTube for expressing politically unpopular but nonetheless very important positions to be discussed. This is equivalent to a kind of a censorship over the whole web. Are any of you concerned about this?
I have a point. That's great you mentioned a company like Google, but I would say another advocate of this is the media. I mean, they really, one of the reasons why Professor Jordan Peterson has had this phenomenal rise globally is because he, put his foot down and he said, equality of opportunity does not and should not mean equality of outcome. And it was so controversial, and yet if you look at it logically, it's not, it shouldn't be, right? I mean, we would like to think that we are in a meritocracy and, may the best person win, who, and you mentioned things like affirmative action and the quota system in several countries, because, you want to encourage talent and hard work and effort, and you don't want people to get, you don't want the wrong person there for the wrong reasons. But I think media plays a huge role, and I think this happens in the US. It also happens in India and many other countries where some of the media houses are really owned by or in bed with a political party, and we see all the news that spews out of that outlet is got a very certain tone to it, and sometimes it's the larger ones, and because they just have that resources, and if that's all that people are reading, that they think that that's all that there is. So I think people need to call out media for this fake news or whatever. Or I would really encourage people, do your research and spend time and dedicate yourself to find the truth, because the truth is out there. Don't believe everything you read and see. Be astute and informed, I think, in this age of technology, and I think people are digitally becoming really equal with access to internet and so on. You need to be an informed global citizen and sort of really know what the truth is.
Well, thank you for that answer. You're really a wealth of controversy and not afraid to say things which may be outside the context of this meeting unpopular. Here we abide by Chatham House rules. We've always encouraged people to speak their minds quite openly and fearlessly, as you all are doing. And what is said in this room, of course, stays in this room. No one is running to the BBC or to CNN to complain about anything that anyone says here. So we're on a firm ground. We're a diplomatic bunch and an open-minded bunch, but we uphold freedom of speech and yet confidentiality of what takes place within our precincts. You're absolutely right about this, and it's a paradox of freedom, is it not? That if we want a free press, and I think certainly most of us want to have a free press, but then the person who owns the press should also be free to express their political opinions and use their press as a platform to do so. That's part of freedom. Nonetheless, if someone then has a monopoly over a national service, as BBC does, and they're basically colonized by cultural Marxists, then you cannot expect anything like the truth. And this is where there's a conflict of interest, yes, between private ownership and freedom of expression and a government organ, which is then colonized by specific interest groups. That's perhaps more of a problem. And again, it militates against diversity, as you say. Young people in particular, who are very passionate and who ought to be very passionate, are not necessarily getting exposed to all points of view on these issues. And I think that's why Jordan Peterson has been successful in Canada, and why we need more Jordan Petersons, perhaps. Yes? Okay. Sir.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ritsu. I'm a director of business incubation firm Sigmaxis. I'm interested in what Mr. Sadhguru said in the introduction about unity of religions. I think this is really the key of the change of the mindset. My background is Japan, and actually Japan used to have a lot of gods. We are quite open about having various gods at the same time, and also respect the nature as well. I'm quite interested in your observation or everyone's observation about how the unity of religions or mutual respect of religion can be accelerated. We see a lot of small sectional fights everywhere, of course, a lot of sectional fights in business as well. But I think one of the key go beyond the power game is a change of mindset. So how do you see the phenomenon, and how do you see how to proceed?
Okay, Swamiji, please.
There is one shlok in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is big language. Ayan nija paro vetti gananam laghuchetasam udara chaitanantu vasudhaiva kutumbakam. This shlok means, this phrase tells us this this is poor, this is the rich, this is big, this is a small, this is a black, this is a white. So likewise divisions we have, but we are human beings. When, just like animals, we are not like live as you want. No, we are given education, we are given some values for living, and that's the way we should come up with the human life. So poor, rich, big, small, anything, any divisions, if you see, the first thing, it is in your mind, and mind plays a vital role. And that's the way education should be in such a way that this diversity, inclusiveness, all this topic has to have in education system round of globe, which will educate our parents to bring up good community, which will hold this world with. I'm also with the thought that English, Hindi, Marathi, or any other Chinese, Vietnamese, any language it may be, all languages are equally treated, respectfully treated, nicely, because each one have to have his own thought, and he can express his own thought in his own language nicely. With regards to world, when we comes out of my country or out of my house, we should know there are thousands of flowers, but we are the persons who can make this type of decorations with different colors, different variety of flowers. But when it comes to bouquet, it becomes a beauty, and that's the beauty of each color. We can't forget the colors which are with the flowers. So it is not man-made, it is God's made, and diversity is a part of our earth. So we should accept all the languages, all the colors, all the faiths we have to accept. But when it comes to global, we should know equally all are important, and we should know that if I pinch Mr. Marinov, the pain, it might be, oh, pain might be, no, it can be any word, but the pain is very important. The pain, if we feel that pain, that wordings have no value, then we have to think of love, we have to think of happiness, and not the way how we express it, not the way how we analyze it. Only important part is ayan nija paroveti. He is not good, he is not bad, he is not like that. But the mindset when you are prepared in childhood days, that's the udarta, means big mind, big heart. You have to be trained in childhood days, and that can be done only with the education. Nothing can be done without education.
Thank you very much. Only to add a bit, when you pinch people, it doesn't hurt. Only you.
Don't do.
The exception.
That'd be a holy pinch.
If we could move from the spiritual down to the, well, or across to the political for a moment, I would get back to you, Carl. We've not heard from you in a little while. How do you deal with these issues in realpolitik? What is your office doing about, or
Sure.
with or against affirmative action and these kinds of issues? You have a tremendous ethnic diversity. How are you coping with it? Do you have quota systems? Do you not? What's your view on justice and injustice?
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to build on what Sir Sadhguru said about feeling the pain. And I think one of the things, I keep going back to design thinking and human-centered design, because a core principle in that approach is building empathy with the other. Empathy building, and that's feeling the pain, essentially. But bringing it to policy making, bringing it to government is relatively new, and so we're basically learning as we go along. But how that is operationalized is you bring different people in the same room, and most of the time, it's the first time they've met. And most of the time, they bring themselves their own biases and their own silos, and they're used to working in their own single unit. And so design thinking, in the way we do it, is a set of tools where different people from different backgrounds come together for the first time and explore an issue together, and then they open it up to conversation. And it requires a very good facilitator like this one, because it can really go crazy if it's not managed well. But in the process, especially if there's a clear problem at hand, in our case it was at first entrepreneurship, and then second it was education reform, you will realize that there are a lot of commonalities among different stakeholders. And when you encourage people to build empathy and to feel the pain of the other, then you slowly break down the silos and you slowly bring down the biases, and together they could come up with something that works for everybody. It doesn't always happen that way. It's not always, especially when you have deadlines in government, but we've seen it work in some areas, and we think that it can be mainstreamed in other policy initiatives as well.
Well, good for you. I would like to say, as faculty of the most storied public institution in the U.S., the City College of New York, which has turned out more Nobel laureates among its alumni than any other public institution. We have 11 Nobel laureates. Our tuition was zero from 1847 to 1976. So our mission was to give a Harvard quality education to people with no money, and the social dividends are huge. Some of our distinguished alumni include Colin Powell, for example, many others who contributed across innumerable fields, and they were, in many cases, and still are, the first of their families to go to an institution of higher learning, and that a lack of money should not be a barrier for them. Minds are a great resource, our greatest resource, you would say. So, I mean, this is an initiative which is bound to pay huge dividends to you in the past. It does not prevent wealthy people from sending their children to private institutions, but it opens doors that badly need to be opened for others who will end up being great contributors to actually humanity, yes? So congratulations for doing that. Sir?
And the thing about healthcare is it's changed, and it's changing a lot. A hospital is dealing with a body, and a body, doesn't matter what nationality it is, the heart's going to be in the same place so a cardiac surgeon from any country knows what to do. However, we're now moving to what we call integrated care. And integrated care is not only about looking after the specific condition, but also preventing it in the first place and following up afterwards. And this is about local cultures. And the big problem that we're having is, for example, Google is becoming a culture, and what is happening is that it's turning people into being in their homes. They're not going out, they're not seeing people, and we need to get back to communities. In order to get integrated healthcare to work well, we have to have communities. And this is something that I'm working on in the Philippines and here in Vietnam, and I like to do it across ASEAN. I'm very passionate about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. So you're a community builder then. You're a community builder. You are a community builder.
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Well, would any of our panelists like to comment on this, or anyone else? I think it's a very important question.
Yes, I think it would not be right to demonize Google and isolate it, because I will give a facetious answer first. My son says, and he works for Microsoft, he said, if you don't like Google, why don't you use Bing? Or use Baidu? But that's the facetious answer. As you know, they started with the slogan, do no evil. And that has become a question mark now. Do no evil? And I think it's got to do with the habits of people. Google has some great advantages. You know, it gives you at the fingertips knowledge. I mean, you have to curate it, you have to find out what is true and what is not true. And I'll digress a little bit just to create some energy in the room. You know, when you talk of fake news, here is a guy who is killed inside a Saudi consulate in Turkey, and he's dismembered, his body is dismembered, he's dissolved in acid, and it vanishes. And one of the most powerful people in the world says, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. So that's black and white, that's not gray. So fake news can come from the very top. So I think Google also, Google is, of course, is a search engine, nothing more than that. Google does not have intelligence. It's searching. It's searching garbage, it's searching fake news, it's searching all kinds of things. Yeah, maybe it will improve. But I think vitamin D deficiency should not be solely because somebody is spending a lot of time searching things. He may be watching YouTube, he may be watching movies, he may be a couch potato watching TV. So let's blame Google, but give it a fair share.
The algorithms are not accidental, however, and there are undoubtedly some conspiracy theorists in the room who might suggest that what you pull up on the top of a Google search is perhaps influenced by the people who are being pulled up. So that's a separate question. But back to your point, sir, about healthcare and with the tendency nowadays, at least among those who can manage it, to treat the person rather than the illness, which is, I think, part and parcel of what you're saying. How do we turn that trick if we're making education more inclusive now? As a fundamental human right and a way to attain one's potential, as you say, from a young age. Isn't this a parallel situation with healthcare? Shouldn't we think that decent access to good medicine, to good preventive medicine, as well as curative medicine is a fundamental right? And if so, how do we make the world more inclusive in that respect? To the panelists or to anyone. Sir?
I mean, we live in a great time when people can communicate so easily. I think as far as healthcare goes, the West can learn a lot from something like Ayurveda, which is, of course, a 5,000-year-old science of integrative healthcare and holistic healthcare. So it's an example of where you can look to another part of the country to see how they're doing things and how they have done things for thousands of years with very good benefits and use that. So I think more sharing of knowledge, and that's a sort of inclusivity in its own right. So cultural diversity includes that as well, learning from each other and teaching as well as learning. So.
Absolutely, and we are. Believe me, we are. It's just slow to penetrate because there are turf wars. The U.S. health industry is worth, I don't know how many $1 trillion a year, and so if you try to make some inroad into this, even with a very good intervention, it will be resisted.
Yeah. It's political more than anything.
It's competition. It's cultural competition. But what you said is absolutely right, and it took decades, for example, for traditional Chinese medicine to begin to penetrate Western infrastructures. And now it's a routine thing that you can go to a good hospital and have acupuncture instead of a local anesthetic or general anesthetic, for example. So there has been a blending together of the traditional wisdom of the East and the West in terms of treatment, and I think that we have yet a lot to learn, but we need more teachers of yoga, because we have many teachers in the West who are teaching hatha yoga, but they don't understand it, and so you can't even get to the higher rungs. Yes, so we need more help to send us more teachers, please.
Yeah, you're correct, and at the same time, the value of our own life is so much. At the same time, why the value for life? Because we as a family, we as a community, we have a faith, we have a feelings, we have this type of things. So what she told, Ayurveda or health, everything is important to gain happiness. And happiness is the core of our own life. So any form of treatment, what she told, Ayurveda, it is just like Ayurveda or yoga, anything. The rishis or the saints who discovered this yoga or Ayurveda, they have experienced all these things. They went into forest and discovered all these things. So whatever is nearby to you, whatever is nearby in your area, they found, they had solution, they experienced all the things, and then they present it for the human use. So I will suggest that if health health-wise, if we come across whole world, it will not be suitable for this part and this part, because every part of the world have their own way of life. So no doubt Ayurveda is supportive for our Indian culture, but it is likewise Chinese also, they have their own treatment style. Like other countries also having their own style. So everyone has to accept their own style of health.
Is this true in Vietnam also?
One minute, one.
I would like
Fine.
to add in for the topic that we mentioned, thanks to Ropen, about inclusive like generation, and very important that Google discussion as well. So for us as a company, so we did a lot of things like we all talk about great things that we would love to do, especially for the younger people, for like this region is very young. But the very important lesson that we learn through years is the way of communication and language is very important. Yeah, it's not only like different in terms of language, but the language of different generation. Because if we don't talk in the way that the young generation talk, we never can communicate with them as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, how much great thing that we love to do is won't deliver. Because yeah, communication is all about like the language that we deliver that other people can listen. If they block it and they feel that no, this is, some people try to educate me on something, no. So it's more like young people, and it's all about a great thing we do, but I think like in another way, how to communicate that other people can understand. Yes, it's a part of language, but it's in terms of deliverable.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm sure that's true in every culture. We have this perpetual generation gap because words change their meanings from one generation to the next. Yes, so it's a continuous effort to communicate between generations. We have time for one or two more questions or comments, sir. And please.
Yes.
My name is Narayan Debnath. After spending about over 40 years in the United States, I recently moved to Vietnam 3 months ago. I served as a professor of computer science and department chair in Minnesota State University for a very long time, and recently came 3 months ago to Vietnam as a founding dean of this College of Computing and Information Technology at the Eastern International University, who is one of the hosts of this forum. I came here to build something new, but here is a question which is fairly open and also towards the understanding of the concept of inclusion and diversity. This panel is fairly diverse, and based on the information from the panel, we heard that India is diverse. Asia itself is very diverse. But when we are in the United States for so long, particularly in academics, we fairly take it very seriously, how to enrich the college campus in terms of inclusion and diversity. And we have a dedicated office for that with a lot of staffs, and we spend a lot of money for this. So the idea is, when in the US, I see that there are different perspectives of the definition of diversity. We know the simplest definition is diverse based on color, culture, religion, languages, race, everything, which is easy to understand. And based on that definition, I recruited many students from international countries to satisfy the need of diversity in the campus. But that's probably not enough. When I am in college campus and I hire a lot of students from India, which is diverse, a lot of students from Asia, which is diverse, does not really satisfy the concept that many of us has in the US. They say, well, you need to hire underserved, underrepresented.
Well, you're asking for a lot, aren't you, in a very short time. But someone with the courage to pick up after a obviously successful career as in the academy. You were in Minneapolis, or?
Yeah, in Winona, Minnesota, southern part of Minnesota.
Yes, and then you've come here, and I'm sure your hosts are very happy and lucky to have you as a dean.
I'm very happy because of the weather here.
I'll bet. Well, not today, but although it's diverse. If I may, well, I'm an American by naturalization. I'm originally from Canada, and I will tell you that I was driven from Canada because of a policy that overtly stipulated exactly what you're saying, but worse. We have no history of slavery in Canada, so we don't have that issue, which is the #1 driver of American diversity. I mean, the meaning of diversity is multiplicity. Any dictionary, even Google, will tell you that diversity means all kinds of things, yes? A diverse person in the US means not that. It's a politically gerrymandered term. It has a cultural Marxist meaning only. And it means that certain groups are awarded moral merit on the basis of historical disadvantage. I'm using this term in quotation marks. It's nonsense. We're all historically disadvantaged, as one of our commentators said. We all come from a place where we probably were lucky to survive. If not for our ancestors, we wouldn't be here. We are all survivors of a struggle of one kind or another. And to impute special privilege to people because of a particular history of 100 or 200 or 1,000 years ago is actually to elevate them to a status of privilege, which is not earned. It's anti-meritocratic, and it will cause the collapse of the system ultimately, which is what it's doing. So your experience of it there is not the universal. It's not what the United Nations would call diversity. It's not what Horasis would call diversity. I'm not speaking for either body, just from experience working within them. Diversity in nature means as many possible genetic combinations as can manage to proliferate. And surely we mean the same thing with human culture, as many languages, as many beliefs, as many different kinds of customs as can manage to proliferate and coexist. Yes, and I don't mean to lecture, but you've touched a very strong nerve. I came to the US because in Canada, I was told there were too many white male philosophers. Too many. I said, well, wait a minute, I'm not white. Take a good look at me. Really off-white, you know, not exactly white. But they have no sense of humor. So I came to the States, and God bless America, because there's still enough liberty there to overrule this kind of Marxist totalitarianism. But it's a very weak and very fragile system there. So I hope that when Asians, who are much more diverse and much more populous and much more young, and to whom the 21st century belongs economically and historically, this is the movement of world influence from the old world to Asia, yes? From Europe and North America to Asia. I hope that our Asian friends will profit from our mistakes and not repeat them. And you will do better than us, yes? That's my great hope. Are there any other questions for the panel? And thank you for that observation. Sir.
I would like to return to the religion. Religion, yes. I would like to ask Mr. Sadhguru one question, please. I come from the Lofter Group, one private company in Vietnam dealing with the agrochemical, seed and food, something like that. But I studied in India for 5 years, from 1986 to 1992. At that time, I observed that there's many conflict between Muslim and Hindu. Yeah. There's many demonstrations between the two communities. They different in religion, they're different in many things. But recently, I observed that the tension have been eased. And I don't know why. What happened in the society of India? What the Indian people, what method the Indian use to ease the tension between the two religions and the lesson learned. Because you see, in the world now, there are many conflicts, mainly based on the religion, different in religion. And do you think you have some experience and other society can learn from the Indian people about that? Yes, please.
Actually, what you have experienced is halfway correct and halfway it is not correct. First of all, each country or each religion feels that my religion is the best, and it is natural. But it is not only with the Hindus or Muslims or Christian, it is not likewise, it is everywhere same. Only thing is when politically any incident takes place, then the world experiences in that angle, how media took it. And in India also, the same things are happening. The political things, we shouldn't consider that it is a perfect or correct analyze, but the original thing, when you go into the crowd, whoever it is, Muslim or Hindus or any sects, it is finally, you should know, I am staying in Goa. We have Christians, we have Muslims. They come, they celebrate Diwali in my ashram. So when there is a Christmas, we travel, we go in Christian people's house and we celebrate Christmas in nice way. If during Ganesh Chaturthi, which is one of the festival, if we don't give food to Christians or Muslims, they get angry on us. And they feel that we are there, they come to our temple, we go there. It is just like they are very close and united. Only politics, when it comes to all parties, votes, this difference, what you have experienced for 5 years, is correct in political way, not in original way.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask our panel, it's just beginning to get very interesting, but as usual, we're running out of time. However, this is the first panel of the conference, and I will urge you to take from this room something valuable and bring it into other sessions and cause trouble there. All right, you're more than welcome to do that. Before we thank our panelists for their very interesting contributions today, I'd like to ask each one in turn for their 1-minute takeaway, okay? So well, let's go the other way this time, and I guess, Ho, please give us your takeaway, all right?
I mean, just as much as I think Ms. Pong was also mentioning about talking to the younger generation in their own language, which also entails talking in their own mediums, being in their communities, serving out the message of diversity within those communities itself. I think what my takeaway is actually with regards to audience development. So for the younger generation altogether, because what we sow today is what we're going to reap tomorrow, and I think it goes all the way back to education. So I think that's my takeaway with regards to developing the audience, and it's not just a one-time thing, but it's something that we continually need to be talking and engaging with the age groups and grow with them in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, lifelong learning. This is a Singapore thing also, long time, lifelong learning. Thank you, Ho. Rupen, what's your takeaway, please?
Yeah, just quickly 2 things. One is that the reason India is a tolerant society is because in the constitution we have separated religion from state. Unlike Pakistan, there is no state religion. So the threat to that is that if we try to impose majoritarianism, one religion suppressing the other, then there will be turmoil. That's one. I hope India is resilient enough to fight that back. The second, I think apart from discussing diversity, we must agree on some positive framework and agenda to remove exclusion of groups of people. If we don't do that, we sit back and say it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. So we must have a consensus in the society of a fair and equitable way of removing exclusion of certain disadvantaged groups. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll leave you for the last word in a moment, okay? Please, Fong, what is your takeaway from our host country?
There are so many takeaways, but I know that I got only 1 minute, so it's obvious that I see is the awareness about diversity of these regions and how we can be inclusivity of this huge diversity. Maybe something like need to be bigger, thinking something of like bigger valuable goals or like feel the pain.
Thank you very much. Carl, what is your 1 minute takeaway?
Sure.
Please?
So my takeaway is this realization that apparently the law that we just passed removed affirmative action in the Philippine college education system. I didn't look at it that way while we were doing it, but this rich discussion on diversity and inclusiveness is yeah, in many ways we are not just for philosophical reasons, but also just for the practical reason of managing the transaction costs of affirmative action is very huge. But ultimately, it also because it promotes inclusiveness and diversity in the college education system. So hopefully, as you said, it will yield social outcomes in the future. Thank you.
We can discuss this later. If you want to save more money, I have some other suggestions for you.
Thank you.
You can fire all the political commissars too. And please, your 1 minute takeaway, Fred. You started a lot of this, so please give us something to finish with.
Thank you everyone for being patient and for participating. Just wanted to conclude with two things. Firstly, real diversity is beyond sex, religion, creed. It's actually diversity of thought, of ideas and opinions. So ultimately, we have to embrace that and make sure that that's protected at all costs. Asia has a rich cultural history and language history. And I think when people, and especially businesses, because at the end of the day, it is the bottom line. And for a conference like this, we have wonderful CEOs here. So when people realize that diversity is an asset and not a liability, that's when they'll wake up and take notice and know that there is profits to be made. And there's a lot of power in these numbers. And we must embrace and protect it. And ultimately, we are one big happy family, so we can learn from each other and spread love and light. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Swamiji, one final word from you?
One thing I should express in this panel, that we are human beings, and diversity is the truth, and we should include truth in our life. And inclusiveness or including truth in our life means it is not go beyond everything, but say that fish should swim in water and not in milk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists for their extremely interesting contributions. And I wish you all a very successful conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.